All right, everyone, good morning and welcome to our May Next Connect. We've got some folks gathered over here at Groover Labs. Welcome to those in the room. And then we've got folks gathering online, and we may still see some folks jam in as they figure out which link is the right way to access this awesome bit of content for this morning. Next Connect May. We are now in month 5 of this program, and in today's session, we're going to give you an opportunity to really hone in on the art of going to market and doing so with purpose, intent, and a plan, as opposed to an ad hoc, fingers crossed, hope it can happen. And the guy that's going to walk us through some of that really pivotal, mind-changing, path-changing thought process and strategy is Max Menke. Max is a founding partner at GrowthX, founded GrowthX in 2015, and then a year later, GrowthX, kind of the curriculum side of things came along. He's been in the world of startups and finance and capital for more than a decade, brings experience to the table here. And frankly, with GrowthX, they have discovered a mechanism for not only schooling up startups at this go-to-market stage, this crucial, stall-heavy stage of trying to grow a young company that is product ready. And they use it to both add to the journey of startups around the nation, but also to find coachable founders and promising startups for their group to invest in. So it is an integrated adventure that Max is on, and he's going to share with us some of the tips that have been pivotal for their portfolio companies and other high growth startups they work with over the years. So Max, say good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Mary Beth, and good morning, everybody. Great to see everybody. Really excited to share this time with you all, and absolutely excited to dive into the art, or rather, as we'll talk about, the science of go-to-market. Mary Beth really hit the nail on the head. This is a place where so few founders are properly supported and resourced. It's an area of entrepreneurship that is heavy on improvisation, on guesswork, on working with feeling instead of data. What we work on at GrowthX is demystifying go-to-market and supporting entrepreneurs by giving them the actual tools to organize and, importantly, execute their go-to-market strategy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do that at GrowthX, how you can start doing it, and some of the things to consider. I'm going to open up my slide deck in a moment and start really diving into the nuts and bolts of go-to-market strategy and how we at GrowthX take companies to market. And a little bit more about GrowthX. We're a San Francisco-based seed stage venture capital fund. We invest in companies, but we don't only invest. We think that our capital is much less impactful than our expertise. So we only invest in companies that we can help. We don't advise, we don't just bring a Rolodex and contacts to connect you with. Me and my team, we get inside of companies. Just this morning, before hopping on with you, I was working with our latest portfolio company. I've got a Mix-Max email campaign up. I wrote the copy, I found the contacts, I found their emails, and we're just going over the nuts and bolts of it. And so we are incredibly active investors because we like to participate in the growth of our companies, and we think that's the right format for venture. And so when we talk about our approach to go to market, what you can know from me is that it's non-academic, it's not theoretical, and I'm not approaching this from the standpoint of a VC who's been looking at companies and picking winners and losers from an armchair for many years. We are entrepreneurs at GrowthX, and we work with entrepreneurs. We help them actually go to market. So everything that we do, everything that I'm going to cover today, we actually deploy it actively on a daily basis with entrepreneurs all over the world. I just dropped a link for folks who want to learn more about GrowthX in the chat, but of course you can check us out at growthx.com. I'm going to cover a whole bunch of information. If anybody has any questions, feel free to come off mute or interrupt or fill in the chat, and I'll be sure to stop just a little bit early to leave time for questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, kick it off, and jump into product market fit and finding the fastest path to revenue. So when we talk about product market fit and customer acquisition, and this goes back to the reasons why we founded GrowthX. The reason why most entrepreneurs fail is highly misunderstood. When you look at the reasons why most entrepreneurs fail, by a large majority, it has nothing to do with your product. And there are lots of organizations that do this research, right? CB Insights, Wilbur Labs, Startup Genome, a variety of them, and every single one of them comes back to the same data. Yes, we know that the vast majority of startups fail, but why do they fail? It's because of markets and people, not because of products. In fact, Wilbur Labs just did a study. They do this every single year. The number one cause of startup failure is running out of cash. And that's 37% of the time. That's a big chunk of the time. And just ask yourself for a moment, how many of us are actually trying to solve that problem? If you knew, the single greatest cause of failure, wouldn't you want to try to actively be avoiding it, right? And from the venture capital perspective, there's a very convenient but misguided narrative out there that, well, the reason why all these startups are failing, and when you look at the data, they're failing to get to market, it's because people are creating products that nobody wants, right? But when you work with as many entrepreneurs as I have over as many years as I have, what you find is that theory, that narrative holds absolutely no validity in the real world. It makes no sense that there are entrepreneurs all around just creating products that nobody wants. So what's actually happening? What's actually happening is that entrepreneurs are creating products that people want, but they don't know how to get those products to market. They either fail to choose a market, they choose the wrong market, they choose a market, but they don't know how to connect their product, their services with that market. And so they run out of time, they run out of capital. And what they're doing, the reason why they're failing is they're improvising. And what these stats are bearing out is the end result of entrepreneurship by Google search results. When you look at academia, when you look at MBA programs, when you look at most accelerator programs, what do you get as an entrepreneur? You get plenty of tools to teach you about cap tables and investor pitch decks and a unique value proposition and a 2-minute elevator pitch. But those are not the things you need to solve for the number one problem, which is runway capital revenue. And so what most entrepreneurs are left with is Google, right? You're Googling cold email campaigns, you're Googling pricing strategies, you're Googling account-based marketing strategies, right? And it's no wonder that most folks fail, because those strategies aren't really a strategy at all. It's highly improvised. And this is why we started GrowthX, because we saw an enormous number of really talented, intelligent, awesome founders with fantastic products failing for completely avoidable reasons. And so at GrowthX, again, we're a fund, but we are also go-to-market experts. Our fund thesis is very simple. We think entrepreneurs are a lot more effective and successful when they raise capital in the form of revenue from customers. And so we support that effort. And we support that effort through what we call the Market Acceleration Program, or MXP. We do that both inside of our fund and virtually digitally to everyone around the world through what we call MXP Online. Now, as Mary Beth mentioned, I've been doing this quite a long time. In the time since I've developed this go-to-market strategy, this go-to-market playbook, I've worked in Canada, in California. Right now, I'm working with over 50 entrepreneurs in Korea. It's our 4th year in a row of working through that government-based program. Worked in B2B, B2C, health tech, gov tech, fintech, marketing tech, ed tech. We invested in a autonomous robotic fish that has a camera on its head, and it swims around the fisheries, and it uses AI to measure the length and the health of the fish, and measure pH balance and all that wonderful stuff. the point is, in all of that experience for companies that are both pre-revenue and post-revenue, for companies looking to develop early traction, what I can tell you from that experience is that while products and markets may be unique, absolutely, the path to product market fit is not. It's a formula. It's scripted. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still hard. It's still darn hard, right? But it is a lot harder to find product market fit when you are reinventing the wheel, when you are treating product market fit like you're the first person to ever find it, as opposed to following a well-worn path that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have gone through before you. And again, it's not unique to any market. We're talking about the fundamentals of customer identification, customer development, seeking fit, and problem solving. And before we even get into the science of doing that, let's just, as an example, focus in on this term, product market fit. I mean, how much of your day is spent being told how important product market fit is? You better have product market fit. If you found product market fit, yeah, right? And yet, how many of us actually know what product market fit is? How do you get there? What is it? And I ask other venture capitalists all the time, they say, well, this company, they don't have product market fit yet, or, give me a call when they do have it. And I just ask them, okay, what does that mean to you? And I met with a lot of, stammering and staring and not really any clear answers. And same question to all of you as well. Do you know, if you are currently in search of product market fit, do you know what that will look like? And of course, you can Google product market fit. You can Google definitions for it. And, you're going to find, about 800 different blog posts, and half of them are going to quote, Eric Ries, the author of, the Lean Startup. And his definition is that if you have to ask if you have product market fit, well, then you don't have it. That's not a definition. I don't know what to do with that. And the other half are going to quote, the world's greatest venture capitalist, Mark Andreessen, who simply states, product market fit is the most important thing in the world. While I agree with you, also not a definition. So I'm an entrepreneur. I know, because everyone's telling me, that product market fit is important. And I better go out there and find it. So I better do that as quickly as possible and spend all my time trying to find it. But I don't actually have a destination. And what other part of your life would that be acceptable? I mean, you wouldn't get into your car and say, I'm going to go somewhere. Well, you can't type somewhere in on Google Maps. You don't know if you have enough gas to get there. And oh, by the way, it's not just I'm going to go somewhere. I'm going to go there as fast as I can without knowing whether or not my car has even 4 wheels to get there. And that's why so many entrepreneurs fail. We're in search of this goal, this destination that is mostly intangible. It's not defined. I mean, for a lot of folks, product market fit is about as comparable as achieving nirvana. It's something where one day I'll appear on a cloud and somehow someone will tap me on the shoulder and say, you've achieved product market fit. So the point of this is, we have to start understanding that all these activities, all these investments in your time that you're making to find product market fit is ineffective, it's inefficient, if not straightforward wasteful, if you don't know the exact destination you're trying to. And so this is the crux of our approach at GrowthX. We have to stop improvising and reinventing and innovating the path to product market fit. And we have to start going to market with intent, with a specific destination and marker in mind. And the place where we start with that is simply the scientific method, right? What the scientific community has known forever, right? What most entrepreneurs do, and why that product market fit experiment fails, is because we're throwing mud at the wall and we're seeing what sticks. We're hoping that people come back to us and tell us, well, that's interesting, or I want to buy this, when that's really not the way the market works. When a scientist wants to run an experiment, a scientist doesn't, pour a bunch of different chemicals into a pot, light it on fire, and say, well, we'll see what happens next. That's how, they end up with, their eyebrows singed off, right? No, what a scientist does when she runs an experiment is she knows exactly how much of chemical A and exactly how much of chemical B and exactly how long and how hot that fire is going to burn for. And before a scientist ever runs an experiment, they do two really important things, really intentional things. Number one, a scientist implements the tools to objectively observe the experiment. Make no mistake, one of the simplest changes that you can make to better impact your business is to stop bringing feelings to a data fight. Rest assured, scientists don't run experiments and don't analyze results based off of feelings. Some metrics they're looking for, and they know what those metrics will tell them about the success or the failure of that experiment. The second thing that a good scientist does is before they start an experiment, they come up with a hypothesis. And hypothesis is simply an expected result. An expected result, if I can create the ideal conditions in this experiment, I expect to see this result. Now, that's very different from what most entrepreneurs do. What most entrepreneurs do is they put the chemicals together, and again, they say, we'll see what the data tells us, and then we'll react to it. Again, this is improvised. This is reacting to the market as opposed to proactively saying, I think this is the best path forward, and I'm going to try and test that hypothesis and validate it. And so getting back to product market fit, for us at GrowthX, the definition of product market fit is relatively straightforward. It's your ability, or any entrepreneur's ability, to acquire revenue using a proven and predictable method. Can I acquire like customers in a similar way at a similar contract value and an average sales cycle using the same method over and over and over? So what do we need to find product market fit? It's relatively simple. We have to have a process, and we have to drive repeatability through that process. We can't just simply be winging it. And one of the bad things that's leaked out of where I'm at, Silicon Valley, is this pressure to scale. As Mark Zuckerberg once said, we got to move fast and break things. Well, that works really well, moving fast and breaking things, if you're backed by Peter Thiel and Andreessen Horowitz, and you're reinventing the internet, and you have millions and millions of dollars to burn. But for most of us, that is a terrible model. That is a very fast path to running out of cash and burning through good customers. So rather than looking at this approach where we say move fast and break things, what we say growth, and what we've seen prove out to be very successful, is what the Navy SEALs have known for a long time. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. What does that mean? It means in order for us to go fast, we have to build the foundation for us to create something, to create a go-to-market strategy that is focused, that is repeatable, that is streamlined, that is frictionless. When the Navy SEALs go on a mission, they don't just jump out of a helicopter and start firing off their guns. Right? If they don't know who they're up against, what the mission is, where they need to go, the directions, which specialists they need, etc., if they don't have the right resources for that mission, and they show up on the battlefield, you can be sure that when the bullets start flying, bad things are going to happen. There's going to be a lot of unexpected outcomes. Well, that's what most entrepreneurs do. When they go to market, they show up and expect to be able to react in real time to different market insights, wants, needs, demands. But what you really should be doing is you should have a plan of attack, and you design that plan of attack, and you make sure that you're well resourced. And if you validate that plan of attack and you have a process, and that process is repeatable, then the biggest shiny object that exists for every entrepreneur, which is scale, well, scale becomes a natural byproduct. If you have a process for acquiring customers, if you can have the discipline to force your process on the customer acquisition strategy side, as opposed to having your customers do that, then that's how you can actually lay the foundation to a company that is venture scalable and ultimately will be able to reach, Series A, B, and so on and so forth, right? And in my experience, the other sort of classic example of this is so many entrepreneurs spend so much time trying to build a better revenue engine. We need a new email campaign. I got to hire a new salesperson or a new head of sales. We've got to be spending more money on digital ads. They're trying to build a bigger, better, faster engine, when the fastest path to revenue is to realize that you still haven't picked up your anchors. You're still docked to the shore. Most of the time when we work with entrepreneurs, the first metric that we see that improves is sales cycles. We just ran a study with a big cohort of ours. We found that we were able to reduce sales cycles over 78% without increasing ad spend or hiring new salespeople, because most organizations don't appreciate the amount of friction and drag that occurs from all their improvised and unintentional sales processes. And the greatest source of friction for the vast majority of entrepreneurs is a lack of clarity of who that target market is. If you don't know who your target market is, then your messaging, your pricing strategy, your decks, your website, all of it will be significantly less relevant and more effective. And so what we find is the single most important asset for any business, it's your ideal customer profile. And I'm not talking, by the way, about a business model canvas or a lean canvas. I'm not talking about a persona, about a tangible group of very specific human beings. Well, why is your ideal customer profile such an important item for your business? Why should you spend weeks, honestly, weeks, validating your ideal customer profile before you even start building your go-to-market strategy? Well, it's really simple. Your ideal customer profile, it's the keystone to your go-to-market strategy. It's the single most important asset to not just any startups business, but any business, because your ideal customer profile informs every single one of the known steps that you have to take to acquire revenue, right? Once you know who that target market is, once you know who your ICP is, that's going to inform your pricing strategy. Your pricing strategy will inform a healthy customer acquisition cost. That'll inform your customer acquisition strategy. How much money can you spend? That strategy will inform the channels. The channels will inform the messaging. The messaging also has to be focused on the ideal customer profile. The onboarding strategy, your sales funnel will impact your CRM. Everything leads back to your ideal customer profile. But when I meet with startups, and by the way, this is how we make investment decisions. We don't accept pitch decks. We don't attend demo days. When folks want to have GrowthX be a potential investor, I just ask them a simple question. Great, who's your ideal customer? Tell me about your ICP. And the majority of companies think they know their ICP. And the response that I get back is, well, my ideal customer profile is architects or manufacturers or moms. Moms, there are so many different types of moms. Moms is not an ICP. Moms is a market. Moms is a huge TAM. Same thing with manufacturers. You're talking about, industrial manufacturers. You're talking about, wood manufacturers, plastic manufacturers. You're talking about, aftermarket, pre-market, OEMs. What are you talking about specifically? And who, by the way, has the job title manufacturer? Very few people. That's an industry profile. So when we're trying to create that ideal customer profile, what you're really looking to do, the biggest change, and frankly, the most impactful change all of you can make today, is just to recognize that your ideal customer profile is not an ideal industry or an ideal company profile. It's a customer profile, because industries and companies don't buy anything. People do. And let's just be clear about why you're creating an ideal customer profile. Because at some point you need traction, you need revenue. And I'm going to use a dirty word here that scares a lot of people and makes them uncomfortable, which is sales. I know a lot of us aren't trained to do sales. There isn't a school for it. There certainly isn't a degree for it. So to a certain extent, we're all improvising it. But what you need to know about sales or acquiring revenue and why this relates to your ideal customer profile is that sales is not about communicating what you do, showing off your product, talking about AI and ML and all your feature solutions in your platform. Sales is about seeking fit. What I mean by that is it's about identifying a problem that you can solve for somebody. It's about helping. Keep that in mind. Your product needs to find a market. It needs to find a select group of people that need help. And it's impossible for you to be able to craft an ideal customer profile when you're speaking in such generalities as manufacturers or moms, because companies don't need help. Companies are just a collection of individual people. You have to figure out who's that individual that your product, your business, your service will have the most impact on. So when I'm trying to find a market, let's just say I'm creating a tool for commercial real estate teams, right? Well, I can ask, Nike or Walmart or Whole Foods, hey, what are your strategic, commercial real estate goals for 2022? But those companies are not going to give me a response because they're companies, they're brands, they're logos, they're characters with a specific font and color scheme. Now, if I hone all the way down to the heads of North American retail real estate for, grocery store chains or retail athletic brands or whatever it might be, now I'm in such a focused area that I can start to understand the subatomic particles about what these people do. How do they do their job? How does the way that they do their job today create problems? How do those problems create a business impact? And the higher up we are in targeting that ideal customer profile, the less effective we are to do the one thing that really matters, which is consult with our customers, get close to our customers, be able to provide not just a product, but insights to be able to show them the benefit of that product and the problems that you can solve for right now. Because if you can't solve a problem, it doesn't matter how great your product is, that won't have value for them. So another thing to keep in mind is that every company has multiple, I mean, dozens of potential ideal customer profiles. And as a VC, trust me, I see this on every single pitch deck, investor pitch deck, slide 17, total addressable market, $6 trillion market opportunity. That is so wonderful. But let's just keep in mind that for most startups, your TAM is completely irrelevant. Your TAM is an incredibly diverse array of hundreds of unique and specific ideal customer profiles. And in all likelihood, you do not have the tools, the bandwidth, the product maturity, the sales resources to acquire your TAM right now. And if you try to send a message to such a diverse array of ideal customer profiles, well, then you're not going to be targeted and be able to solve the problems of any one of them really right away. So when we talk about building that ICP, it's not about finding Mr. and Mrs. Right. This is where so many startups and so many entrepreneurs get stalled. Because when you look for Mr. and Mrs. Right, you see a big blue ocean. But then where do we end up? Paralysis by analysis. You need to take your ideal customer profile a step further and identify who is Mr. or Mrs. Right now. Where can you get the most amount of revenue and learning for the least amount of effort, given your product, given your bandwidth, given your team, given the resources that exist for you? And for a lot of folks, they don't truly appreciate how limited their resources are as far as their go-to-market strategy. I mean, every single founder has 3 full-time jobs, market development, product development, and fundraising, right? Go-to-market is a full-time job in and of itself. So trying to pull off 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 markets at once, you're simply not resourced to get there. I mean, going back to the topic about product market fit, if you only have a 10th or 20% of your time can go to market, then you simply don't have the time to be trying to tackle multiple markets at once. And again, who Mr. and Mrs. Right now is not exclusive to all the Mr. and Mrs. Rights. We have to stop focusing on acquiring a TAM, and we have to start executing on acquiring a beachhead and enabling that beachhead to prove your experiment, to validate your target market, to give you enough stay on the field and demonstrate that you have a predictable and repeatable and ultimately scalable revenue engine. And once you have that, then you've achieved true investor readiness. And then that's where the VC dollars come in to help you expand to the rest of that market. But if you're trying to acquire that whole TAM all at once, well, how's that going to impact your website? How's that going to impact your messaging strategy, your pricing strategy? Because again, have different needs, different wants, use different language. So what are you looking for in Mr. or Mrs. right now? Well, the most important aspect is what we call worldview, or put another way, where can you find people, companies, individuals who are already sharing your worldview, people who are already deploying budget in the types of products, services, businesses that you support. So one classic example here, Jeffrey Moore and Cross, never read it before, absolutely recommend it. He talks about finding early adopters. That's wonderful. I'd love to find early adopters. Unfortunately, there isn't a LinkedIn badge, that just says, well, I'm an early adopter, this company's an early adopter. But how do we identify early adopters? It's fairly straightforward. Look for companies that you go on their website. They talk about how they're innovative, how they're tech-driven. You go and you look up all their employees on LinkedIn, and what do you see? You see, they've gone to certain technical schools, or they talk about how they're focused on change management. They're growing the company. The company has a corporate venture capital unit. The company has an innovation team. The company invests in and supports startups and innovation. Why are those important markers of an early adopter? Those are important markers because those markers are not free for those businesses. They require capital. And businesses don't spend money out of the goodness of their heart. They spend that money because they expect to get a return. And so when you see a business with something like a corporate venture capital, you see a business sponsoring, startup pitch events, you know that business is doing that with the expectation that they're going to be able to work with risky but potentially game-changing technologies. Another example of worldview that I think is super tangible is, imagine if I was starting a Wi-Fi business for the airline industry. Blazing fast Wi-Fi, you could stream Netflix and Hulu and HBO Max and YouTube TV and all those wonderful services, right? What most entrepreneurs would do is then they'd say, well, let me get a list of every single airline, and I'm going to just start reaching out to all of them, right? But does every airline, just because they fly, tin cans around the earth, does that mean that they all actually act the same? That they all deploy capital the same way? That they all deploy budget the same way? No. You look at what are the airlines that are ranked best in the world year in and year out, right? Singapore Airlines, United Arab Emirates. Are those just the luckiest airlines in the world? They happen to just keep winning the competition? Or do they get there because year after year they invest in their own product? And why do they invest in their own product? By the way, when I mean investing, I mean they're spending money off their balance sheet to improve their product. And when they improve that product, they expect to get a return on it. They expect to make more money, to defeat the competition, to be able to keep more customers. And they're successful at doing that. On the flip side, you look, at what we have here in the States. Look at Spirit Airlines, right? Spirit Airlines ain't on nobody's list of, best airline to fly, right? Spirit Airlines doesn't care whether or not you enjoyed the flight. If they only care about whether or not they get you from point A to point B, your heart's still beating, and if your luggage shows up, they give themselves a pat on the back. They're like, well, it's a pretty good day for us, right? Now, Spirit Airlines doesn't have Wi-Fi on their planes today. And this is a critical misunderstanding of Signal. A lot of entrepreneurs would look at that and go, hey, they don't have Wi-Fi, I'm selling Wi-Fi, natural fit, right? No. Spirit Airlines not having Wi-Fi is actually a communication of their worldview. It's not like if you bumped into the CEO of Spirit Airlines and you said, well, hey, did you happen to know that all of your competitors provide Wi-Fi to your customers? The CEO would go, what? What? They have Wi-Fi on, you mean in the air while they're flying? Get out of town, right? Like, he's perfectly well aware. When he's flying in his private jet, checking his email and the Wi-Fi paid for by his customers, rest assured the CEO of Spirit is very well aware that they don't provide their customers with Wi-Fi. That's a worldview. And those type of examples exist in every single industry. Again, products and markets are unique, but that path to product is not. There are leaders, there are innovators, there are laggards. There are companies that actively deploy budget into companies like yours because they see it as a revenue driver to their business model. And there are others that are tight-fisted and don't see the value in working with others. And for you all, when you're identifying that ideal customer profile, you have to build those indicators into your ICP so that you can shorten the path to revenue, accelerate customer acquisition, and ultimately build that repeatable, scalable engine that's going to attract investors. And so a little bit more on how we actually do it. When you're creating an ideal customer profile, it's not about just simply picking an industry. Again, we already know every single one of the known steps that it's going to take you and the resources that it'll take you to acquire customers. We don't need to, as is a common startup adage, we don't need to ready, fire, aim, right? Or shoot first and ask questions later. What we need to do is actually plan first, right? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And as we're identifying the right ideal customer profile, the best practice is to come up with multiple ideal customer profiles and analyze each one for its relevancy to all of your resources, to what you need to get to market. So for example, if we have, let's just say, an ideal customer profile that's in the enterprise, okay, I'm going to go after big companies. Well, what does that tell me? That means that the average contract value for these folks will probably be $150,000, maybe $250,000. Woohoo, big ticket sales, right? Well, the problem is, if you just go ahead and Google sales complexity matrix, or if you've been in the game for long enough, you know that a $250,000 sale is going to take 12 to 18 months to close. Well, that's uncomfortable, but let's go for it anyway. Well, here's the problem. You only have 6 months of runway. So right away, your go-to-market strategy, it just doesn't pencil out. Now, that example seems super straightforward. I'm positive I didn't break anybody's brain explaining that. But that exact mistake is made on a daily basis by entrepreneurs all around the world. And I see it in my inbox. Hey, Max, we're raising a seed bridge plus round, whatever they're calling it these days. And we were trying to go after the enterprise market, but we've decided to pivot. No, you didn't pivot. You've run out of cash because you tried to match a contract value against a very short runway, right? And every single one of these pieces are the known steps that you need to acquire customers. So you start coming up with different ideal customer profiles. And then when you come up with an ideal customer profile, you simply see if you can get the pieces to fit with your runway, with your team, with your product maturity. And when you do this 10, 15 times over, you get yourself hyper-focused down to Mr. or Mrs. right now. And again, it's not about eliminating other ICPs. It's not about saying never. It's about looking at where are you going to get the best traction for Delta? Where can you get the most amount of revenue for the least amount of effort? And just quickly to wrap up how you actually get down to that ICP, And by the way, you can go to growthx.com and I'll send a link as well over to our actual ICP starter kit. Again, this is something that takes far more than 45 minutes to explain. So we built it all out, and feel free to download that and check it out. But if you want to build your ICP, you start with an ideal industry, then you get down to identifying those early adopter companies. Once you're in those early adopter companies, you start identifying simply the ideal department. Where's the budget for your product, your service going to come from? And once you know where that comes from, then you identify the economic buyer, the ideal influencer. And this is a great place for many entrepreneurs to check themselves. Do you really know your ideal customer profile? Is it an ideal company profile or ideal customer profile? And if you do have an ideal customer profile, is that ideal customer profile an actual economic buyer? And what you're looking for within that economic buyer, now that you've whittled it down to a specific person, now you can understand their worldview. Now you can get inside their shoes and their keystrokes. And the most important thing that you're trying to do as you're evaluating this ICP is to simply understand, how does this person do their job? And what are the metrics that they are measured by? Because every single person in every single role has metrics. And if you want to know if your product's going to be relevant, going to be impactful to a market, you need to learn what their metrics are, first of all. And second of all, you need to be able to tie a direct line of correlation between your product, your service, its impact, and what it does for their metrics. If you can't do that, well, then you're never going to be able to connect with them over email or over the phone. And certainly, even if you do, you're going to have a lot of trouble and headwind creating any sense of urgency. And by the way, it's not hard to find people's metrics. There's a great tool out there. It's called LinkedIn. What we literally do at GrowthX is, once we had come up with an ideal customer profile hypothesis, we go into LinkedIn, we find 20, 30, 50 of these people, we read their LinkedIn profiles. If we can't find enough of those profiles, we don't even have to leave LinkedIn. You click on the jobs button and you look at that, you look for people hiring those roles, and they'll tell you in incredibly clear detail how they do their job, what's important about this job, what are the metrics that they're measured by. And in an hour of LinkedIn research, I can do months of customer development that would take me forever from conversation to conversation. I can very quickly get the signal I need to identify, is this a real market or is this a later market? Is this right now, or is this Mr. or Mrs. Right to be tackled at a later date? And the most important and final thing I'll wrap up with is that the reason we get into this level of detail, the reason why we take this slow, smooth is fast approach is because for most entrepreneurs, again, they don't have a clear ICP. And because they don't have a clear ICP, their website, their copy, their email campaigns are, well, we're an AI ML solution that's built a software platform for. Your customers don't use that language. Your customers are not on the lookout for a data solution. Customers are on the lookout to have problems solved. And what you need to be able to do to effectively go to market, test a market, validate a market, is you need to be able to communicate not what you do, not what your product is, but what your product does for your customer. And make no mistake, it's impossible to communicate that if you don't have a hyper-targeted and focused definition of who your customer is. We talk about customer development, we're talking about people, individuals, specific titles and roles. And so if you want to significantly accelerate that go-to-market strategy, start seeing better deal flow, start seeing validation happen much more quickly, the single most important place to spend time is on that last word right there in the market, not improvising, not innovating, not throwing mud at the wall. Please don't launch another 500-person email campaign hoping to hear back from somebody. There's a much more focused and intentional approach that'll help you protect your runway and get to market faster. So thank you, everybody. I'm happy. I know we're running up a little bit long. I'm happy to stay on for a bit and answer any questions. I also recognize this was really short. It's pretty tough to really get into the nitty gritty of all these things that I'm telling you are so important. But the good news is, if anybody's really interested in diving in deeper, I can certainly send some more resources your way. I talk a lot about ideal customer profile development on our blog at growthx.com. And likewise, we have an ideal customer profile starter kit there for people who want to dive into it. This is, by the way that we meet startups that we'd like to invest in. For us at GrowthX, again, we don't check out pitch decks in 10 demo days. For us at GrowthX, the way that we meet our investors or potential portfolio companies is by helping. In fact, our most recent portfolio company, House Keys, came from a workshop just like this. And Julius and his team followed up with an ICP worksheet, and we just started working on it for a few weeks. And lo and behold, we found a company that we were excited about, and now we're raising the next round of funding. We've been able to increase MRR almost 300%. Because help is the best form of due diligence. So happy to pause there. Thank you everyone for listening in, both online and in person. If anybody has any questions, feel free to fire away.
Oh, yep, now I am working. All right, this is Mary Beth again. I'm just chiming in. Max, we're going to do a couple of quick things that we sort of housekeeping-y things, but we'll keep the line open. If folks on Zoom have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and they can either pile up, and we'll get to them in a sec. But we're going to do a couple things. First of all, I had Quinn load in a quick survey into the Zoom, and we're going to do it by the good old-fashioned show of hands here at Groover Labs. One of the things we've been thinking about, and one of the reasons we've been chatting with Max and GrowthX, is as we think about developing an accelerator for Wichita and regional founders, we Nexus really see part of our sort of lane is to help startups at this go-to-market stage. We are less about the ideation. There's great resources around the community for that, and we can connect people to those, but we are unlikely to run you've got an idea on a sticky note kind of level accelerator. We think we actually could develop a meaty accelerator, do cohorts of founders and young companies here in Wichita that are right at this stage. So we've got a survey question, which is, as we develop that kind of programming, or as we blow out NXTCONNECT to do more of this, would additional time with Max and his crew and some of their tools be beneficial to folks? So online, respond to that survey if you could. In the room, anyone is a yes for a little more of this would help your stage of business? Okay, perfect, got it, thank you. The other thing we'll do is give a little bit of commercial for what's coming up next in NXTCONNECT. Max, stick with us through this because we'll come back to you with questions, but I'm sensitive to the fact there may be folks that need to head out to a meeting at the top of the hour, or their next part of their super productive day, or they're just going to go back to their desks and go, holy crap, I needed an ideal customer profile right now. But so next month for NXTCONNECT, we're going to get together here at Groover and online with the Matchstick Alliance. This is a group of professional services companies here in Wichita, truly best in class and normally high-priced help from Gardner Design, from Fulton Siefken Law Firm, from AGH Accounting and financial consulting firm. That Matchstick Alliance, they have branded and banded together with a specific strategy to help young companies grow. And they have worked among themselves for introductory packets, deferred payment, kind of schemes to try to get you really good help as a young company, even before you can afford really good help as a young company. And so they're going to come out and talk with us about some of the top 5 dumbassery, sort of mistakes that young companies tend to make, that they see and frankly often have to clean up after, whether it's DIY branding, or it's legal structure for your business, intellectual property protection, et cetera, along with financial strategies. So they're going to come out and do a real practical roll up your sleeves, take questions from the crowd, but give some of their war stories to help you benefit from the learnings of the young companies that are their clients today, or that they've seen out in the marketplace. So Friday, June 25th, 11 a.m. right here at Groover Labs. I said online. Are we doing online for that one? We're starting to get to like once you're in the room, people. So everybody zoomed in today. Know that we're sunsetting this sit at home in your PJs thing, and we're going to try to get folks in the room to foster the dialogue that being face to face can really help generate. So I know we had at least one question for Max. Is that Quinn? Have I done all the housekeeping things I need to do? We thanked Groover for letting us gather here, and we talked about next month. All right, cool. Let's kick back to Max. And Max, you can see the chat question that came in, yes?
Yeah, indeed. So I'll just read out for everybody. It says, what do you do differently for your PF fit? I think it's product market fit considerations for MVP versus production product. The answer is nothing differently. This also goes true to scaling. You know, we work with companies where the question is, well, what do I do? How do I enter the US market or the French market or the Southeast Asian market? At every stage when you're entering a new market or entering your first market, the path is always the same. You don't want to land, expand, and scale all at once. You need to establish that beachhead. Who are your anchor customers? How can you find out whether or not there's product market fit there? And it's all just about testing things that are stage relevant. So if you have an MVP, maybe it's not a good idea to sign on or try and pitch people to, you know, sign up for a year-long engagement at $100,000. Maybe what you really need is to be doing short form pilots just to start testing your product and getting some product validation out there to make sure that it does what you say it's going to do before you start rolling out, you know, your go-to-market strategy much more widely. But again, for almost every business, there's some new horizon, there's some new, you know, green field of go-to-market strategy out there. Again, whether you're a startup or a Fortune 100 company, and in every single instance, the fundamentals don't actually change. It's the resources that change. And make no mistake, just because you can deploy $10 million in marketing spend doesn't necessarily mean you'll be successful either. I mean, many of the corporate innovation teams that we've worked with have painfully learned that lesson, that it's not about all of the resources you can pour in, it's about aligning those resources. Again, as I alluded to before, you can have the biggest engine, you know, the biggest tools for marketing and sales, but if all the friction you're creating is really just creating drag, those resources really just get wasted.
Great point, Max. The balance of what you can sell and what you can learn, depending on the stage you're at, you've just got to take that into account. All right, folks, questions from anyone in the room before we break? All right, folks are going to just reach out to you direct. I think, Max, get ready.
Yeah, that sounds great. If anybody has any questions, just feel free to reach out to me, max@growthx.com. I'm looking forward to it.
Or you can just find him on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks so much for coming. Today's Next Connect. See you next month. Have a great day.